is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable, Stu Horvath, and we have a very special guest today, Jean deMers, here to talk about Ballads of Oræd, coming out soon from Exalted Funeral, designed for use with old school essentials. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Can't complain. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell us a bit about Ballads of Oræd?
It's a collection of adventure modules I've been writing for use with D&D or, similar systems for a while. I started by releasing the individual chapters as zines every month, and then eventually I had enough to collect together. But basically it's sort of half art, half writing, designed to guide you through this world I've been putting together.
Now, you sent me, I think earlier this year, you sent me a set of most, if not all, of the zines. And I was really struck by they're all multicolored paper, and just there's something really magical about the zines that I thought we should talk about first, because that's where the book kind of sprung out of. Are they also, what's that funny photocopier that zine folks like to use?
Oh, yeah. Risograph, yeah.
Risograph, yeah. Are they risographed? Were they risographed?
Yeah, exactly. I've got a risograph machine in my studio, so I do all the printing and everything myself.
So these were all part of your Patreon, right?
Yes, yeah. That's sort of how it first started.
And then everyone was like wound up being a specific chapter in the book, but it's a different region or a different topic in each one, right?
Yeah, I first sort of drew out the map of the world, and then would choose like a specific location to focus in on and flesh out through one of these zines.
Is the world, would you say it's art first or narrative first, or?
Yeah, I usually start with the art. I'll like sketch out ideas before I get into any writing, and then I'm always referring back to the drawings to have the writing like follow along with that.
Kind of tie it all back in.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one of my superpowers is to be able to like look at an artist's work and say like, oh, they really like these three artists, and be fairly right most of the time. I have a hard time zeroing in on what I think that your influences are. Could you talk a little bit about that? I always see golden age of illustration artists in most role-playing game artists, but I can't really figure out which one, and it's sort of, I get static because there's other stuff in there that I can't quite pinpoint.
Yeah, I definitely have those influences as well, but I think a lot of the early D&D art is definitely a big influence on me. Like David Trampier was always one of my favorites that I go back to for inspiration. But a lot of comic artists as well, like Mobius, would be a big inspiration.
Oh, yeah, for sure. You can see that.
I could totally see that now.
Pretty wide variety. I like Picasso a lot as well, his drawings, and Aubrey Beardsley. A lot of the sort of pen and ink 18th, 19th century stuff.
You're an artist by trade?
Yeah. I say my main thing is like comics and tattoos.
Are you a tattoo artist?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, nice. Cool. I didn't know that. How'd you get into role-playing games? Is it a childhood thing for you, or did you come to it later?
Yeah, both my parents played D&D, so I didn't really have a choice in
no way
in getting into it. Yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool.
And they were, they started when D&D was coming out, so they were more used to like AD&D first edition. So that's what I was first exposed to, and what D&D really always has been to me is like those early editions. So that's a big reason why I ended up going with old school essentials for the system for this book, because I always liked how those sorts of games played. And I think anytime I'm writing adventures for D&D, it meshes the best with those systems.
That's so interesting because I feel like so many of the people that we talk to are older, so they're first generation players. So we've not really spoken to a lot of people who are sort of second generation, brought into it by their parents. And my parents were sort of like, I don't know about D&D. Like maybe you shouldn't play that. And to be brought in as a younger kid, but to have first edition be sort of your touchstone. How has that changed or molded your approach to role playing games? Do you think? Can you speculate on that at all?
Yeah, I played through all the rest of the editions as they were coming out because that's what my friends would be playing. Less people were interested in learning about THAC0 and all that.
Hey man, not many people go whack up for THAC0, so I get it.
That's how I learned to do math, basically.
Same here, basically.
What a cool way to learn how to do math. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, because listen, if you can tackle THAC0, you're good.
Yeah.
Everything else is gravy.
Yeah. And if I was able to do it at like 10 years old, I don't think anyone should complain
Safe
too
to
much.
say, yeah.
But yeah, those early editions always felt more role playing first to me. I think more open to creativity just because of how limited and simple the rules were. Sometimes you had to, like, if you wanted to do like some very specific action, there probably wasn't a description of exactly how you'd play that out, all the parameters and difficulty checks. So there's a lot of improvising, and things were vague in a way that let you really explore it your own way. And I found in more recent editions, it's all the different abilities and skills can sort of limit that in a way when you're too focused on the mechanics.
You're like staring at your sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really leave a lot of room for nuance and for interpretation, because as much as like standard D&D rules are made with the idea that by having all these rules and these feats and these abilities, you can do anything, it almost kind of prohibits you from doing anything.
Right.
Unless it falls within that very specific range.
Yeah, like, I always liked having a character dual wielding, and then get to a later edition. Oh, I need all these different feats and certain ability scores if I want to have that be viable at all.
Right. Yeah. That's a good example of it. So when you were a kid, when like your friends were playing third edition, I guess, when you kind of were still playing first and second.
Yeah.
Did you manage to drag them back to first edition with you, or did you have to go along with the dominating trend?
No, I went along because I did really like all the third edition when it was new. All the books looked really cool.
Yeah,
the design and layout of those I liked a lot. So I got into it and did enjoy trying them out, because I always like, as much as I like, first and second edition, it's fun to, take different pieces from other systems. I even, look at like RuneQuest and Cyberpunk and other RPG books I can get a hold of.
It's interesting. I look back on third edition and I never want to play third edition ever again, because I think that overall, like, it was just too many rules spread over too many books. But I did like the way that it sort of codified so much. And even though I didn't like the way it codified it and how that played, I liked the way the game kind of inspired me to mix and match stuff in weird ways that I had never done that before. So you would get like, because they had that template system for monsters, like you could just make like a fiendish gnoll or whatever, and then like you just stack all this stuff up and have like these really strange combinations of abilities and monsters. And I just feel like that has sort of, without the rules sort of underpinning, I see that in a lot of places in the OSR world. I feel like third edition sort of opened the floodgates for a lot of different approaches to what a D&D like experience could be. And I feel like I could see a little bit of that in Ballads of Oræd too. It's interesting that you call it ballads. It makes it very musical. Do you have a lot of music in your background?
Yeah. No, I think music and fantasy have always been connected for me, because I was exposed to a lot of Tolkien growing up as well, and I think the songs were always one of the most important parts of that. They really sort of brought you into the world and told you about, whatever people or place and time you're at without having to just, explain some lore to you. You can sort of be more immersed in that experience.
It's sort of there's the Bard, and I guess the Dragonlance books had some songs in it, but overall, considering how much Tolkien uses it, you don't see a lot of song in RPGs. Sort of like you don't see a lot of, I feel like talking animals are a feature of fantasy stories up to a certain point. You just don't see talking animals in D&D.
Yeah, no, I've got both in this book.
That's good. We need more talking animals. You have a tendency to put smiles in interesting places too. I'm flipping through and there's like a mountain smiling at me.
Yeah, I know. I do like fantasy that doesn't take itself too seriously. There's a lot of the darker fantasy that's really big in OSR and newer D&D coming out, and I always like when it's a bit more mystical and more lighthearted in a way.
Yeah, lighthearted, but it still kind of looks dangerous in its own way, which I think is kind of important. And I do agree with you with a lot of OSR stuff. It becomes sort of over serious to the point of self-parody. The real fun, we talk about this all the time on the show, the real fun of like old school D&D art is that, it was drawn with such heart and such intention that you get more immersed in it because it does give you a real sense of danger, And I think the color choices that you make throughout this book also kind of, it builds nicely. The palette of it all builds nicely to the world, and it speaks to the actual, it's fantasy. It's supposed to be, it's fun, but, there's also some stuff boiling in the underbelly.
Yeah, I think it provides a nice contrast when there is something more serious and dangerous happening. If, you're able to have those carefree adventures as well, not just, grueling, dark experiences the whole time.
There's so many things that it reminds me of, but it still is very much its own thing. Like there's sort of, there's definitely like a whimsical quality, as John said. There's this sort of dark underside that makes things dangerous. It reminds me a lot of how when knights in King Arthur's stories venture into the other side and encounter fairies and mystical things, and it's not just that they're encountering fairies like in terms of like the fairy tale fairies. Like there's like a weird like allegorical language that's being used. And it doesn't really make sense to me as a modern reader. So it kind of like, it just washes over me as really very surreal or disjointed in a really appealing way, like a tarot card almost. I feel like there's a lot of that in here. There's like a symbolic language at play that I'm learning as I read.
No, yeah. I'm glad that comes across. Yeah, tarot cards are definitely an inspiration for me as well. I like that sort of mysterious quality that you don't understand everything you come across right away. Some of it's never explained. You have to take it as part of the world, just something that exists there, and you might not find a reason for it.
Yeah, the potential meanings, right? Like even the cover, like there's so many things to look at on the front cover, but I keep focusing on the background. There's this tower where there's like a serpent around it, and it's just so like what does that mean? I want to go there. I want to find out, is the serpent still going to be there when I get there? Like it's so far away. It makes me want to dig in and go further, but I also am going further, sort of knowing that there might not be clear answers to find there. It's an interesting vibe.
Yeah, and I try to make they're all references to things that actually appear in the book. So once you come across them, you realize like, oh, that's, I finally made it to that tower.
So I do want to ask, as much as the art sets the stage, I feel like the book as an object, there's a lot of decisions that were made that kind of just that establish vibe without, being story or art. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. I think that John hit with the color. Color is definitely a big choice, but the binding and the way you did the side art, I was wondering if you could just sort of talk a bit about the decisions that made into the book as an object.
I have a lot of RPG books on my bookshelves, and when there's some interesting design choice made to them, I I feel like I always come back to them more, and I like, yeah, the whole book is sort of designed around the contents or the theme. Like with those third edition manuals, they all, felt like they were part of the world. So for mine, yeah, like the part of the binding was practical as well, because with the Coptic binding, without having like a hard spine, you can open it flat to any page. And I find when I'm using a manual a lot, it can fall apart pretty quickly if I'm, pressing it open to keep it open to whatever page I'm trying to read from. But yeah, I wanted it to feel like a book you might come across in the world itself, like it was written by one of the characters.
Now, am I seeing this correctly? Because obviously we're doing this interview over Zoom. Is there art on the pages on the outer exterior of the book?
Yeah, exactly. Along the spine has the title, of course, but yeah, the page edges as well have
that's so cool
art to them too.
That's hot.
Printed right on the side. As soon as I learned that was an option.
Oh yeah,
As
soon as I got it out of the box, I was like, "What is that?" Like I couldn't like it. I've just never seen that on a book. It's either gilt or it's just pages. So like to actually have art there, like really like was a moment of delight and confusion when I got it out of the box. It was so cool.
And a lot of that's thanks to David Hoskins at Exalted Funeral as well. He really helped me put the idea of the book together in that way.
Shout out David Hoskins. We love that guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Is the book entirely derived from previous material from the Patreon, or is there new material? It seems different having gone through both, but also not like with a fine-tooth comb,
Yeah, it does have some different and new material, because as I was putting out the individual zines, I was experimenting with the design and layout a lot, and the writing style, and I wasn't planning on putting together a book at that point. So once I was compiling all of them, I had to think about editing them properly for the first time and making them consistent, and fleshing some out that were, a bit shorter, or adding details that sort of came along as I expanded the scope of the world.
Did you find that moving from the risograph to more traditional printing was challenging or different? Or
yeah, I tried to keep that same feel as much as I could with having the full color printing for every page. So every page is fully saturated with ink. So each chapter can be a different page color without, the page actually being a different color itself. I scanned in some of those risograph textures to try to keep that same feel, even with the more traditional printing methods.
I think that contributes to the strangeness of the book, the sort of hard to pin down. I think that it does sort of retain the risograph quality in a way that isn't immediately obvious, but sort of informs my eye. It's cool. Will we have more ballads in the future if this goes well?
Yeah, definitely. I spent it was about a year's worth of the zines that came together for this, with a bit of extra work as I was putting it together, and I continued making another chapter each month after that. So I probably have enough for another book already in the same world. So I'd be very happy to put out more of these, because it's a lot of fun to put them together.
Jean, very cool. Very excited about this. This is coming out soon from Exalted Funeral.
Yes, that's right. Very soon.
Very cool. So you're definitely going to want to keep your eye out for that. It's been a pleasure having you on the show today. Where can people find your work on social media? Just
with my name, Jean-Frédéric deMers, on Instagram. JeanDeMers.com has a link to my Patreon and everything there.
Very cool. There'll be links to all of this in the show notes as well. It has been another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can people find you on the internet these days?
Primarily, they could find me on vintagerpg.com, where I recently just finished all of my posts for 2025, and then I got Ballads of Oræd, and now I have to figure out which one I'm going to bump to include Ballads of Oræd.
Oh, someone's getting the bump. That's tough. That's tough. Well, I mean, the good thing is you have like 365 choices, so only the strong survive. You can find me across the internet at John McGuire RPG. I'm on Blue Sky now. I've actually been posting. I'm actually posting more across the world. I'm getting out these days. I'm doing things. You could find any of my games that I produce, 321 RPG or Zombie Brain Eaters for 5 Alive RPG over at exaltedfuneral.com, which is a great place to shop. You're going to shop there anyway. And the holidays are coming, so why not buy some of your old buddy HB's books? If you really want to give me some sweet support over on BackerKit right now, by the time you listen to this episode, we're only going to have about 5 days left on BackerKit for the 321 RPG expanded rulebook and Encyclopedia Monstergoria. You can get both books and both PDFs for $50. We got a lot of deals going on over there. It's a great way to show your support and get in on the ground floor of a really cool game that's been around for 5 years. But it's a new era for us. 321 RPG over on BackerKit, 5th anniversary, expanded rulebook, and Encyclopedia Monstergoria. If you like the show, why not rate, review, and subscribe, because your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. And if you really like the show, why not become a patron? Patreon.com/vintage RPG. We got a behind the scenes look at the stuff that Stu's working on. We got a behind the scenes look at the stuff that I'm working on. We have a tier at $5 where you can play a game with me every month. The day the episode drops, I'm going to be running Top Secret, the modern version of it. At the $10 tier, there's a West Marches game that's ongoing with Stu. You could also get out of my game as well. We have early release episodes for as little as $1 a month. They come out usually at some point between Friday and Sunday, but you get them before anybody else. And we have a killer Discord community we'd love for you to be a part of. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor. Take care.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dego West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.